All right, we've done chapter 18, now time for chapter 19, and this one's focusing on the heart. So we're just going to do an overview of our cardiovascular system, so looking at our different circuits on how blood is traveling to the lungs as well as the rest of the body, looking at the heart parts and what's on the outside of the heart. So we have two different circuits, so study guide question, what are the pulmonary and systemic circuits and what type of blood flows through these circuits? So your pulmonary circuit is on the right side of the heart. So we have two roughly halves of the heart. The right side is your pulmonary circuit. So it receives deoxygenated blood from the rest of your body. It sends it to the lungs for gas exchange, and then it comes back to the heart on the left side of the heart, which is going to be your systemic circuit, which is going to receive the oxygenated blood from your lungs, and it sends it to your system, so the rest of the body, and then it's going to come back into the heart to be received again from the pulmonary circuit. So pulmonary referring to the lungs, your system is basically the rest of your body. So this is just another view of it. Left side of the heart, your systemic circuit. So what I just described. I need to get rid of that first slide then. Oxygenated blood coming in from your pulmonary vein. So this is the left side. So after we've done the whole oxygen exchange and carbon dioxide, all that jazz. Oxygen comes in, goes to the left side of the heart, back out to the rest of the system of the body, so through your aorta. So you will need to know these major blood vessels going in and out the heart. And on the right side of the heart, that blood drops off that oxygen. It picks up carbon dioxide. It still has some oxygen, so it's not like it dumps everything out, but comes in through your inferior and superior vena cava to the right side of the heart and is sent using the pulmonary trunk to go to the lungs to start this whole process all over again. So here's just another view of it. So looking and showing pulmonary circuit, lungs, coming back in to the systemic circuit, goes out to our rest of the body. So our system coming back in to the right side of the heart. Okay, so what is the heart like? It's in the mediastinum, so kind of the middle portion of your chest between your lungs. It's kind of upside down. So the base portion of the heart is actually the widest portion near the top, and the apex is near your bottom. So at any age, your heart about the size of a fist. So even your cute little baby child at home, their heart's about the size of their tiny little cute little fist. This isn't on the test, but it just describes where stuff is. So I'm going to keep going, again, showing kind of left side of the chest a little bit. So mostly center, but pushes into that left side a little bit. Okay, so around our heart, so just like our other organs have connective tissue around them, just as general protection, but also, and I'm going to go back to that previous screen, we have our heart, which is beating and pumping and moving around. Our lungs expanding and contracting, moving air in and out. That's a lot of rubbing up against each other. So to help protect the heart, we have the pericardium. So it's a double-walled sac. So it has a inside layer and a outside layer. Basically, it just prevents the friction between the heart and the lungs. So the two layers, we have our parietal pericardium, which is on the outside, our visceral one, as in inside organs, that kind of situation. So toward the organ of the heart. And in between the two different layers, there's a little bit of fluid. Again, that just helps keep everything nice and slick and helps, again, with that friction with the lungs. So here's just a picture of it. So it kind of goes out and then folds back in on itself. So kind of like a fist punching into a balloon. And again, it's just connective tissue. Has some more collagen fibers to kind of anchor it, and that just keeps everything in place and keeps it from rubbing up against the lung. Okay, so let's look at our anatomy of the heart. So here is an actual real heart. The ones you will do in the lab aren't as pretty. They'll have a lot more fat on them. But you'll still get the gist. So the way our heart is situated in the body, so here we have our apex at the bottom. Here is our base near the top. It's kind of crooked and it's also twisted a little bit towards the back. So our right and left sides is separated by what's called the interventricular sulcus. There's also one in between the top chambers, our atrium. So on the outside of the heart, these blood vessels, they're all covered in fat as just a way to protect them. So there's also a big blood vessel that runs here. So you can see this kind of beauty queen sash looking thing that's gonna go directly across. That's on the front side. And that also separates your right and your left half. So when you get to the heart, when you get to the lab and able to cut up your heart, basically you're gonna find where's the back, where's the front, and essentially bagel slice through it so you can plop this bad boy open and see this. So this is looking from the back towards the front. So our left side is now on our regular left side instead on the patient's left side. So let's look at our parts. So we have, again, our left and right sides. In this view, we have our very thick left ventricular muscle. Right side's a lot thinner. We'll talk about the functions of that later. We have little valves. Those help to control your flow between your different chambers. You have these structures, these little strings. We'll talk about them later. These tendinous cords, those are going to help with controlling those valves. And there's some muscles at the bottom that I've also kind of outlined. The papillary muscles help with controlling those valves as well. Atrium are very small. So left and right, again, they're just going to they're receiving blood, so they don't have to do much. It's the ones that are sending blood to other locations that we focus on because they have the muscle and, the chambers are just receiving ones and they just dump it into the other ones. Okay, so that's just a cadaver heart to look at. Again, you'll do something in the lab. It either will be pig, we may have cow. I have no clue. It just depends on what Jeff orders. Okay, so let's look at our heart wall. So our heart is a very muscular organ. It also does have multiple layers, just like other organs. So we have 3 different layers. We have our epicardium, our myocardium, and endocardium. So kind of similar to how we did something in AP1, or either I'm getting it confused with AP2. I think we did some different layering in AP1. Anyway, so epi, something epic, large on the outside. Myo is another form for muscle, and then endo on the inside. So those are our 3 layers of our heart tissue. So our epicardium, which is the same as our visceral pericardium, so that little sac on the outside helping to protect stuff. There's also some adipose, so some fat tissue, just again, protective. And there's also your coronary blood vessels. So these are the blood vessels for the heart. Those are traveling there. So those are going to feed the heart and then pick up waste products and send it back. So it has its own blood supply because as you get to some of these thicker outer layers of muscle, they especially are going to need their own blood supply. Okay, also you can see on this, the endocardium, and I really want to show this, see how shiny that is? So just like inside your blood vessels, it has that coating to help keep things from sticking, keep blood vessels from sticking, keep platelets from sticking, and so it's continuous with that lining on the inside of your blood vessels, so keep things nice and slick and keep from clots from happening. So same thing with the endothelium of your blood vessels. So that's on the inside. And the fun part is the myocardium in the middle. So this is our muscle. This is doing the work of the heart. And it depends on how much work it does. So it's proportional. So on the left side of the heart, it does more work. It's sending blood to all around the body. So it needs to have a good, strong muscle contraction. Okay, let's try this again. Okay, so left side of the heart, very thick muscle, big contraction so it can send blood throughout the entire body. So good, need strong pressure in order to push that out. So it has a nice thick layer of muscle. And you'll see this even with the whatever animal we do in the lab. Right side's a lot thinner since it's only sending blood to your lungs. So shorter distance, doesn't need much muscle. So there's a bunch of collagen and elastic fibers also within that tissue because, again, your heart is pumping all day long, always working. So it just gives a good structural support and flexibility. It also provides electrical insulation. So later when we talk about the action potentials again, when we talk about that again, part of the ability of this muscle to contract at the same time is that this network allows for that action potentials to travel through the muscle and allows them to contract at the same time. Although this isn't on the test, but I just wanted to show you so you can know functionally. So here we have the outside of the heart. Again, you won't see this in the lab because you'll have layers of fat all around this. But if you look at the muscle orientation, so the way the fibers are organized, they're organized in a spiral pattern. And the reason for this is so you can squeeze from the bottom of the heart and twist and push the blood up towards the blood vessels here at the top. So here we have our pulmonary trunk to go to our left and right side of right lungs. And then also here, push it up and go to the aorta so that it can go towards the rest of the body. So just a little piece in there for you. Okay, so let's look at our heart parts. So your labeling on the exam will be from a cartoon picture, but you'll still see these same parts with your lab heart dissection. Okay, so we have 4 chambers of the heart. We have a right and left side. We have top chambers and we have bottom chambers. So our right and left atria, which is our top 2 chambers, their job is just to receive blood returning to the heart, either blood coming from the rest of the body or blood coming from the lungs. These little auricles, those are just kind of like an overflow room. They're these kind of like floppy dog ear looking things on the heart. So they'll expand if you have a big rush of blood coming in and your atrium can't hold everything. At the bottom, we have our ventricles. So their job is to send blood away. So they're going to pump the blood into an artery. So whether to send it to the lungs or to send it to the rest of the body. For sake of time for the YouTube videos, I'm just going to quickly just skip through all of the anatomy stuff because it's not a labeling thing on the test. But I did keep them here in the PowerPoint so you can actually see them, even though you won't label them for the test. But you will label this. Okay, so here is your word bank for the test. Here's the exact picture that I'll use for the test. So, as you're going through your exam labeling follows your blood flow through the heart. So, where do we first come into the heart? So, we'll start in those blood vessels. And then we'll go through the flow of blood as it goes through the heart. So it's going to follow that. So you don't have to worry about, where these random labeling pieces. It's going to follow what they are. So let's look at what we have. So we have our superior and inferior vena cava. We have our right atrium. We have our right atrioventricular valve, or AV valve for short. Well, it's labeled that way there. We do have tendinous cords here, which I believe, yes, and this is the Latin form. It's chordae tendinae, so these little strings here. And let's see, is right ventricle on there? Right ventricle is not on there, but what is labeled on there are your papillary muscles, so down here. So there is no right ventricle on the test. Oh well. Okay, so up here we have our pulmonary trunk, so we're going to the lungs, and then we come back in using our pulmonary veins. We're going to enter into the heart to our left atria. Left AV valve isn't on there, nor the cords or anything else. So left AV valve, left atria, left ventricle, and then out through the aorta. So it's going to follow the same blood flow through the heart. Okay, so let's look at our chambers. Our chambers do have walls in between them. So a atrioventricular sulcus that separates our atria top chambers and our ventricle bottom chambers, and a interventricular sulcus, which divides our right and left ventricle. So you do have some kids who are born with heart defects where they have holes in these, and that affects their pumping of blood. They have a mixing of oxygenated and deoxygenated blood, so that's why they have to get that stuff fixed. They have to make sure that there is a clear division between your between your heart chambers. Here I'm going to just briefly mention these. So there are blood vessels on the outer surface of your heart. So again, taking blood to the heart, but also back into that right atria to receive that deoxygenated blood, so back from the heart. So you'll see here there's a blood vessel that runs there. So again, that's your kind of beauty queen sash in the front. Then there's this coronary sulcus. So here is on the back, so you'll actually see this big flap of a blood vessel that's on the back side of the heart, so it helps you to turn front from back. And it kind of goes just across the base of the heart, very large, and that's pretty much where almost everything dumps back into and to go into your right atrium. There we go. Ooh. Okay, so, oh no, I clicked too far. So this is just going through all your, just pointing out different major markers of the heart and different anatomy structures. Again, the heart structures that you'll label is on that previous slide. So again, just more structures. Again, they're not on the test. Now, for our flow of the heart that we'll talk about later, one very important part are the valves. So these valves help to keep the blood in the heart flowing in one direction, because you don't want blood to be backing up. You need to keep everything moving. You also need to make sure that oxygenated and deoxygenated blood doesn't mix. So you have these valves to help control them. So we have valves between the atrium and the ventricles, and then valves on the two major blood vessels out of your heart. So the first two are your atrioventricular valves. So AV valves for short. So you have one on the right side, one on the left side. Their job is to keep the blood from going, keep the blood going in one direction. So it's going to go, the blood's going to pass through these valves into the ventricles, and it keeps them from going back up into your atria. So these valves, unfortunately, do have other names that were previously what they were called. So the right AV valve is also called the tricuspid because it has three different parts. The left AV valve is your bicuspid valve, so it has two little flaps that create its valve. It's also called the mitral valve. So other terms that you will need to know, just because some of your older nurses, older health professionals, that's what they learned. And a lot of times they don't change their vocabulary. So you just have to keep up with some of the old vocabulary. As well, it helps if you're looking at an older like textbook or older research paper. Sometimes they still will have that older text on there, so the older vocabulary. Okay, so controlling our AV valves. So kind of like how you've seen like Western saloon doors where they just kind of flap open. Well, if you don't control them, they're going to just flap back open into the atria and allow for blood to go back into the atria. Attached to our valves, we have what's called chordae tendineae, or you'll also see it labeled as tendinous cords. So that's our heartstrings. So those heartstrings are attached to those valves. They're also at the bottom attached to our papillary muscles. So these papillary muscles at the bottom, when all of your ventricular muscle contracts, these papillary muscles will also contract. They'll pull on our heartstrings. So they'll pull on those, that pulls on those valves, and kind of like when you deploy a parachute, and how the strings or rope or whatever they're called on the parachute will hold the parachute in a kind of dome-like shape. Those chordae tendineae or tendinous cords will do the same thing from those valves. So they'll help to hold them there in place and keep them from flapping open into our right or left atria and prevent blood from going backwards. So it keeps the blood in these lower chambers as they're being pumped out to our other area. So essentially keeping them going in one direction. Okay. So those are AV valves, chordae tendineae, and papillary muscles. Okay, our other set of valves. So on the top of our heart, we have our aorta, the one in red. We also have our pulmonary trunk here. So in both of those two large blood vessels, and you actually can see that tricuspid one here, so our three little flaps, those valves keep stuff that blood has passed into those larger blood vessels. Can you see it? No. Yes, you can. So here on the other side, we have our other aortic valve. So after blood has been pushed through to these larger blood vessels, it keeps it from coming back into our two ventricle chambers. So we have two of them, and they're named for which blood vessel they're in. So going to the lungs first, we have our pulmonary semilunar valves, and they're called semilunar because they have kind of a crescent moon kind of shape. So kind of like a little dip in them. And then also the one in the aorta. So there's there. So they don't need chordae tendineae and papillary muscles to help with them. Their structure helps with their closing. So just like our saloon doors, they flap open, but because the curved shape of them, when they close back up, they close back in on themselves, and then that just keeps the doors closed so they don't, flap back open. Okay, so that's our second set of valves, our semilunar valves. So we have one in the aorta and one in our pulmonary trunk going towards the lungs. So this is another view of them. So here's our AV valves up top here. So our little flaps, and you can see the heartstrings or our tendinous cords or chordae tendineae. And then our ones for our aorta and our pulmonary trunk. So aortic valve and pulmonary valve. So going through the blood flow of the heart on the next video, because I just realized we're at 22 minutes. So I will see you on the next video.